Okay, guys, we're on the countdown. I'm gonna give you 30 seconds to get in the seat so we can get started here. Yeah, Bonnie, would you mind doing the countdown? Okay. More people.
Oh yeah, you're good.
He really already gave her the birds.
I got the birds.
So good morning, everyone. Glad you're here this morning. There's a wonderful thing outside in the sky that always makes me feel happy, and I bet the rest of you feel exactly the same way. A little sunshine goes a long way. We are happy today to have a UUCD, I don't know if you're a member, who has also goes to UMB, who went to Morocco in the summer of 2022. And while she was there, she had an opportunity to learn about the culture of Morocco and conduct research on energy transitions. She's going to give us an overview of what she learned there, and I can't wait for it to get started. So over to you, Katie.
Thanks. Right, just let me know if anything's weird on Zoom. Yeah. So thanks for the introduction. I'm Katie. I studied abroad 2022 in Morocco, and it was a great time, so I'll just get into it. First, just a little more introduction, specifically who am I in the academic context, because I am more than this. I'm fifth year undergraduate. I'm finally graduating this spring. I'll have a BS and an environmental science and a BA in philosophy after I finish. And I'm really interested in a wide range of things. I kind of split down some of my interests, but the top part is what I'm pursuing. I just applied for graduate school. I'm interested in hydrology and flooding and urban planning, but I'm also just interested in a wide variety of philosophy and social studies things, so things like that. And I did that study abroad. Okay, sorry, these are my goals for the presentation. I want to keep it relatively formal. I did throw this together this weekend, but I wanted to mostly share my experience there and then briefly discuss my research and leave a bunch of time for questions. So, Bryn, can you tell me when it's 10? Cool. Yeah. But so my study abroad was 6 weeks long, so it was a really good amount of time for my first time, living outside the US. Well, probably my only time. I don't plan on moving, but for a period, May through June 2022. Morocco is located North Africa, just south of Spain. You can see in the map. It's only 20 miles across the ocean. You can see Spain from Morocco if you're up there, and vice versa. And they speak the three main languages are Darija, French, and Amazigh. Darija is Moroccan Arabic. Amazigh is the indigenous language, and French is the colonial language. A very diverse country in both culture and landscape. So while I was there, I was at the lower picture. I don't know how to say that quite because I don't speak good French. I did my best there, but it's the Université Internationale de Rabat. And I was in this undergraduate research study abroad program that UMD runs, where you go to Morocco and do research with a professor there, but also back in the US. It's a really good opportunity to get good research skills, but it's also just a great opportunity to study abroad and get some funding for it and whatnot. So that's how I ended up in Morocco, was through that program at UMD, where they have this partnership with that international university that sends us there. And oops, too fast. So I just wanted to show a little bit of the landscape diversity first. It is absolutely gorgeous. You've got everything from a little more mountainous into the deserts to the Sahara. And the cultural diversity was also cool. The cities were beautiful. On the right, I'm pretty sure that's the entrance to Fez. I took, that's the classic Medina, of their historical market. Upper left is Roman ruins. The Romans were there 2,000 years ago. And then left is Chefchaouen. That's really famous as the blue city. Blue city. Every building there is blue. It's gorgeous. So it's this beautifully diverse country with a lot of different people becoming very international. It's kind of at the middle of Africa and Europe because it's so far north that there's just been historically a lot of influence from both. And then because it's also like an Islamic country, there's those ties to the Middle East as well. It's considered part of the MENA region, which is the Middle East, North Africa. And it's just really this hub of like international cultural diversity. It's so cool. So I'm going to share a little bit of kind of a list of stories, little things, and then I'll get into some of what I studied while there. Start. The weirdest thing, I just wanted to start with this. For sale in a Moroccan mega mall was a Minnesota crop top. I didn't buy it, but I didn't know what to make of it. Yeah, there was no matching mini skirt, but there was a mini skirt with Boston across the butt. So I don't know. Oh, that was that rack there. There's a few of them. Yeah, I don't know if they would have been big enough for me, but yeah. And then the most interesting thing was this restaurant, Itai, combined with Los Burros. It was a combination of Vietnamese Mexican food restaurant in Rabat. It was also the only place in Rabat that I got decent tacos. But that is my favorite restaurant there. And you can see in the right there, this is an advertisement from the restaurant's Instagram. They've got sushi, they've got tacos, they've got it all. And then, yeah, there was my parents actually met when they were on study abroad together in college in Germany, and they talked about really missing American food or just things that were more familiar to them, and that was Germany. So I found the same thing when I was here, that I started missing things I wanted. I took a screenshot of me talking to my friends in the lower left and complaining about the cheeses they have there. I just really wanted some good Wisconsin cheddar or something. They didn't have any. They had French cheese. They had a lot of French cheese, but it's not the same. And then on the right, that is, except for that Vietnamese Mexican place, on the right, that is what they would serve you if you got tacos somewhere. It was just like a chicken wrap. And they gave me ketchup and mayo with it. So I had to take a picture. I did miss good ketchup. Their ketchup wasn't as good, I think. So getting into a little bit more of what we all went into there. So there was a lot of cultural experiences we were able to have, and just we had a host family I lived with. She was just like a maybe 60-year-old woman, had adult children. They were out of the house. So I had a roommate and we lived with her for most of the time. And we got to go around and do different things. Like we went to the Sahara, we went to, we did a class on like calligraphy. We got to go around and to the markets and like see different things. We got to see traditional tanneries, traditional weaving shops. That's where I got this scarf that I have out, pottery, things like that. But then my favorite cultural moment I was going to say was I went to an art museum one day. And so I've got pictures of this coming up. But prior to going to Morocco, we talked a little bit about culture and different things. And so currently in Morocco, any sort of, I think they call it lewd or unnatural acts with the same sex are illegal. So basically doing anything gay. And so there's just kind of like precautions in like how you act and stuff, because it's way more traditional in that sense. But I went to this art museum and I had this really interesting experience of seeing this picture, this portrait. And I was like, that looks queer. Like that is a man with high heels and whatnot. And so they had this whole exhibit on identities and social identities and the social image. And I was really intrigued by seeing what kinds of different cultural movements you have going on. Because there's always like, you think of like the official things, like I think of like what's going on in Florida here or something. But there's always like those underground movements, there's always the people. And the students we interacted with, a lot of them were very interested in social change. So I'm really interested to see what's going to go on in Morocco. But I really liked seeing this art museum. And they also, as part of the exhibit, had mirrors alongside all the portraits. And this blurb, luckily they had English because my French is bad, talked about examining your relationship to yourself and others and like social image with the mirrors. So I have a picture of myself standing next to the portraits. But there was an entire room full of different photographs from famous photographers showing different images of social life, but this was my favorite, alongside mirrors so you could examine yourself before them. And yeah, and the last line says they invite visitors to mime the attitudes of the represented persons in order to detect language of representations. I think the grammar's a bit off. These role plays transform the spectator into an actor and allow him to study the roles and codes of social roles and question his own person. Yeah, I was fascinated by that. And actually, on my way to the art museum, I saw this graffiti on the side. In the middle, you can see it says, "Love is not a crime," with the like multi-gender symbol next to some other, next to booyah, booyah. Yeah, but that was something that I was really interested in seeing, because you get one view when you're reading about like the official policies of a country and what's illegal or what like the adults are saying or whatnot, but it's really interesting to interact with the college students who were like just more on my peer level, and just to see how their experience is as well, and then see what kinds of like social push or like what kinds of movements there are. So that was definitely my favorite moment, was that. And then the last thing is the coolest landscape had to be the Sahara. I mean, I had seen sand dunes in the US on the East Coast, but I had never seen like miles and miles of just red sand in every direction. We rode camels out, stayed in the Sahara overnight, and then this next picture is big. Got to watch the sunset and the sunrise, and then got to see the stars over it. I couldn't get good star pictures. I don't take good pictures, but they were absolutely gorgeous. And so I left off my experiences here on the Sahara because that's kind of the main reason why my research started. So the research component of this is pretty much just, so like it's a great opportunity. The professor who encouraged a lot of us to apply wants us to like learn research skills, and especially in undergrad. Like, this was my first big research project. It wasn't perfect, but I feel that I did a really good job for my first one, and it was really hard, and I learned so much. And now I'm starting another project because why not? And I feel like there's so many skills I learned from that. But also, the research was kind of an excuse to get us to Morocco in a way, to have these experiences, and that was so valuable. So that's the reason why I even went to Morocco in the first place. And once I knew I was going to Morocco, we had to think, okay, what am I going to research? And my interests lie in a lot of environmental things, social things, justice issues, sustainability, things like that. So the first, I start reading about all that stuff. The first stuff I see is solar. That's a huge thing. Morocco is a leading industry in solar. And so in the Sahara, it plays a big role in that. So that this picture in the lower left is the Ouarzazate solar plant that is over 7,400 acres of solar panels. It's huge. But so this is where my research started. And I thought that was fascinating, because I heard before about solar capacities of the Sahara and how much there is, because a good chunk of the country is Sahara. Majority of the people live in the cities alongside the ocean or in the mountains. And it's only like scattered rural, more traditional communities in a lot of these more desert areas. Like, there's vast stretches of just land and desert. So it seems like pretty straightforward. Like, there's great solar capabilities. And I'll get into some of that in a minute. But I also had learned, this is interesting because going into this, I didn't know about solar that wasn't the panel type. And they do have solar panels there. Like, on the right, that's a solar panel at the university we were studying at. But on the left, those aren't solar panels, those are mirrors. And so what happens is that giant pillar in the middle is full of, it's like liquefied salt. And during the day, it heats up to intense temperatures because all the mirrors are angling light at that pillar and heating it up really, really hot. And then at night, when the sun goes down, they use the transfer of the heat from the salt into these turbines that go like underground, and it spins the heat difference, like the hot to cold, does some turbine stuff. and makes electricity. So that was fascinating. I didn't even know there was different types until I started studying this. But so then when I got into this was I was doing my research with Catherine Millen, who's an anthropologist that presented here a couple years ago, actually. And she studies like social movements and energy transitions and justice and things like that and the role of community. So as I looked further, I started getting into what kinds of social stuff go into this all. This next slide is wordy because I just screenshotted from my presentation poster in the end. You don't need to read that, but if you need to. So I started looking into like the politics and conflicts and justice regarding energy in Morocco. So the main thing is Morocco has no major fossil fuel reserves. Most other countries in the MENA region have at least some fossil fuel reserves, but Morocco does not at all. And so that has played a large role in their economic idea of going completely renewable by like 2030. I don't know if they're on track for that, but that was their 2019 or 50% by 2030, fully by like 2050 or something. But that was their energy goals of a couple of years ago. And so they would then be able to sell a bunch of energy, not necessarily to Europe, but maybe more to, was it Nigeria, I think, and a few others south of them possibly, but like they're kind of a dominant force in this region. And the king wants to leave his legacy as this idea of technological innovation and progressive thinking. He's well revered as such already in the country. He did a lot under his leadership. There was a lot of like a push for like women's rights in like the early 2000s that happened, and this technological stuff. So each king wants to leave their legacy, and his chosen legacy is to be this one of like innovation and forward thinking. So then it kind of sounds all nice at first, but like anything, there's always social considerations that can often get pushed aside when we just think of climate solutions as like very technological. So a large part of the issues in Morocco, and I couldn't necessarily study this there, this is more through research because this is way too contentious to study in the country, and you like can't mention Western Sahara. I was going to point it out on the first slide, but if you remember on the Morocco slide, there was a label of Western Sahara and the whole country was highlighted. See if I actually, anyway, I'll pull it up at the end. Morocco considers itself as owning Western Sahara as part of Morocco, and Western Sahara considers itself a sovereign nation. And this has led to a lot of conflict between Morocco and Algeria as well, because Algeria supports Western Sahara and has housed people who left Western Sahara, like a political group that tries to get sovereignty. And a large part of the energy stuff that's been going on in Morocco has to do with what's called like techno or energo politics that look at how there's relationships between literal power like electricity and technology and like figurative power like strength and dominance. Because so Western Sahara is considered the last, like the Africa's last colony, where after, I don't know enough of my colonial history, but there was France and Britain and all these had it all divided up, and then there was that period when they were doing a lot of fighting for independence, and now there's a bunch of nations that weren't there before, but like the people were, and yada yada. But Western Sahara is considered the last one of those colonies where Morocco has control over it. And a large part of that control has been through, or one tool of that has been through energy and resources, and using land in Western Sahara to make energy. People there make it, but don't necessarily have get money or even have electricity. And it's been used as a political tool in occupied areas where electricity will be cut off, or they're just not paid and don't actually have any of the resources that are being taken or used from that area. And so I looked at, in my research, I did do a survey of students, but that was kind of, I'll do it on the next slide. I didn't practice this part. So I did a lot of reading with community conflict and injustice. I brought a couple things just to reference if I need be. But there's this idea of green capitalism and the privatization of nature that I looked at, where sometimes there's ideas presented as very forward thinking or very green thinking, and because they are like pushing forward climate solutions and technology like solar panels or wind, things like that, but they're doing it through the lens of exploitation still, and like perpetrating the same they call like systems that kind of brought us here in the first place. This idea of like ownership, this idea of like privatization and profit making off of renewables, and basically the exact same stuff that led us to take coal and oil and exploit that and profit, but just doing it through the lens of green because it's solar or wind. And so going back to Wars's art, I'll just go back to that slide with that beautiful thing. So it seems initially like it's in this desert. There's not much there. It doesn't really matter. But looking into some of the conversations with people from the city of Wars's art, which is right by, there's a lot of conflict there where they weren't consulted at all about the land, and the government the Moroccan government took it to make the project. They said that they don't see any of the profits, they don't know where it goes. And a lot of this land has historically and traditionally been used for grazing animals for them. So they had a relationship to the land that the country deems like just barren desert for solar that was then taken to make this kind of thing without really any consensus or talking or benefits being seen. And we see this all over the world. This isn't just like a Morocco thing. We see this in the US. But so this was just a jumping off point for me to kind of explore how energy transitions can be used to benefit or harm communities. I'm not going to be able to get into it all, but I also looked into a little bit of just case studies around the world, solar parks in South Africa, where workers who were making the solar said they didn't have enough money to get electricity themselves. Looking at, I think it was either Australia or Britain, I'm mixing up my case studies, where communities with wealth were able to advocate for where electricity, the sites for different like production facilities, like for wind or solar or whatever, would go, but then poor communities had no say, things like that. So you see this like around the world, where without input from communities, without actually examining like who's benefiting, who is profiting, whose resources are taken, you end up just kind of perpetrating systems of injustice that exist. So when I'm jumping off of that, I started looking into as well community acceptance and community benefits. Catherine Millen, who when she presented here a few years ago, she talked about her solar commons model that she works on, which is this project in Arizona specifically that she's worked on, but other places as well. But her main project is in Arizona, where they look at ways that like low income, like different communities that have different like marginalized status, like communities of color, low income communities specifically, how they could benefit from a renewable transition as the owners or the profiteers of it, or basically where the community itself owns its electric production. So they worked with this neighborhood near Tucson, Arizona, that used a community center and solar production on the community center roof to produce energy for the community. And then the community both got the energy and then invested the profits of that energy into the community. So the homeowners or people like in the community didn't get the money directly, but it went to like a community fund that was used to fund like various social things in the community, like after school programs or playgrounds or whatever. And then so when I did my survey, this is kind of where I started. I took these guiding research questions of, are community voices and concerns prioritized in energy projects? When community voices are ignored, does that perpetrate additional injustice? And will addressing community concerns help create our just energy transition? So when I did my survey, because I kind of just needed to do something in order to have data and compare, I had college students in both the US and Morocco, and I asked them how important it was to them for X, which X represented, I had a series of questions. X represented a category of scale. So it would be like, how important do you think it is to your community as a whole? Or like, how important do you personally find this for energy production to focus on solutions for the following blank issues? And I had a few different things like water, cleanliness, or like climate change solutions, or like economic opportunities, things like that. So I was just trying to get an idea of what students said they were interested in and what they thought their communities were most interested in and their countries as a whole. And I did find that like you could kind of group some of those things. The US students, which was interesting, US students were more concerned about energy transitions being green than Moroccan students, but I don't think this reflects them being more environmentally minded. I think this is more of a reflection of when you say like, what does it need to focus on? You think, what is it not focusing on? And the US has not shown an overall country interest in green solutions, whereas Morocco has really pushed this narrative of being a green country for a bit. Whereas a lot of Moroccans are more concerned with economic issues in their communities and rank that higher as like wanting the country to focus on like things that would benefit community prosperity and like their ability to get jobs and things like that. But I kind of just used that survey to look at how concerns can differ in different places as to represent why you can't really do a good overall like one size fits all policy that people want, where you want to like sometimes it's and like we all kind of want some magical thing that's going to make everything better, but we end up finding that that just doesn't work because different things work in different areas. And when you try to barge into an area and say like this is going to work, you often end up not seeing what can harm in the process. Like if you were just going in and saying, well, there's desert here, we could put solar panels, and not seeing that this land was maybe had value of grazing land to the people of the city there. So this is what my whole paper is on. I've got it here. If we want to talk more about that after. It's 10, thanks. Perfect. Yeah, and so then I kind of just ended up writing about like the role of community and all of that, like what factors go into ignoring community voices and what kind of furthers like exploitation, harm, and just even accidental harm, like which like you go in thinking you know what you're doing and you haven't talked to people. And then what factors help create that just transition. I looked at some of the case studies of like times communities are involved and like what happens when a community has their needs for like put forward. Yeah, so it was a great time. It was a great study abroad. And I would recommend Morocco for a vacation or something if anyone wants to go. It's beautiful there. And this is kind of, yeah, I wrapped up this research last year, so I haven't even really examined this in the last year because I kind of left it sitting for now. Yeah, and I'm gonna just kind of move on to, I wanted to leave enough time for, oh, lastly, I didn't have a place to put these photos. There were monkeys on the side of the road at one point, and there was a baby, and he was so cute. I mean, like, it's like sucking its thumb like a human baby. It's so cute. Yeah. So I didn't have another place for these photos, but I really wanted to include them. Yeah, but I wanted to leave some time just for different questions, either about the research or about Morocco in general. Yeah.
Very, very interesting. Does anyone have a question? Right?
I've got one, Katie.
Okay, we'll do yours first.
I'm curious, was it through Professor Maloon or another connection why did you select Morocco again as your kind of case study?
It's through the undergraduate research study abroad program at UMD. Morocco is the only country they do that through. So it was just, so actually it was because the professor that leads this program also runs university honors, which I'm in. And so he really pushes it to all the students that if you want to do a study abroad, do this research study abroad in Morocco. And so I just applied and did it.
Katie, did you say that you actually have researched with community on gathering some of this data?
I just did the survey with the college students, and then the rest of my research was more reading and writing. I mean, I did some, I guess what Professor Malone calls like ethnographic study a little bit, which is like the anthropology. I'm coming in not really with a social science background, so I did a lot of that work through her, but just like going around and like I took a lot of pictures of solar panels there and went to some different events and got information just to see what kind of people were talking about there. And then when I did my survey and the reading, I just used all of that and kind of compiled it to talk about like what goes into constructing people's ideas of like narratives around energy justice, what's actually happening, are issues being ignored, stuff like that. The survey itself was pretty simple. It was just an online survey that I sent to students in here and in Morocco.
So
I've got another one if there's not any in the room.
I'll get to you next, Brett.
Sounds good.
The community in Arizona is one that has
Catherine Millen, she does work like personally with them. I just used the work that she did and wrote about, and then through my conversations with her, I didn't actually do work in Arizona. I just did Minnesota students and Moroccan students.
But as far as you know, the community in Arizona is one that has worked according to Catherine.
Yeah.
Mr. Cease, did you want to ask your question?
Yes, I did. Sorry to interrupt. Speaking of Arizona, that's where we're tuning in from. So great to hear a little bit of discussion. And I'm just curious from your research, Katie, did you find other models of collective ownership of some of these concentrated renewables that would be an example of what kind of Morocco could do or future communities could do instead of kind of the current system of exploitation you talked about? Were there other kind of economic arrangements or shared ownership that we could be inspired by?
I think a lot of times the ones that seemed more successful were smaller scale, which is difficult because if we want to do something larger scale, that leaves a lot of questions. But I also think smaller scale is where you're going to get the ability to focus on individual community concerns and not erase or like forget about smaller concerns when you're kind of trying to do an overall policy. You're gonna miss what individuals need more, which is difficult when we're trying to do larger scale projects. But I think that a bunch of smaller scale solutions are generally better. Oh boy, there's a lot of people.
Thanks so much for your recommend, but I was just wondering if you could. It sounds like in my mind, Morocco didn't seem like such a progressive country as it seems to be. Could you comment further on that? Throughout the country,
So
is it pretty forward thinking?
They're like the most progressive country in North Africa, and they're really proud of that. They're like, I'm not sure like which elements, like on the social stuff or environmental, which were you looking for? Just anything? Both. So kind of like they're very progressive for their region, and they've made a lot of progress. And I think there's going to be a lot of really interesting things happening there. I like, for example, like on like queer issues that I was talking about, those aren't necessarily like they're not necessarily like as progressive as a lot of us would like. So I feel like it's hard for me to say as an outsider too, because like I'm looking in from my perspective, and I think they have a lot of work to do. But I also think that's stuff that is happening and being pushed for. Like a lot of the students there are really interested in like women's rights and queer issues, and they also do have a lot of racism to work on, specifically with sub-Saharan Africans. But it's kind of, I think, on a similar level to like what we have in a lot of areas here. Like we've got a lot of, it's different, but there is a lot to work on in both places. And then in terms of environmental policy, I think, yeah, they have a lot to work on, but I kind of think that they are doing better than us in some of it. regards. Like even if I don't personally think it's for the right reasons, like they're doing it, like they're pushing forward and clean energy at a rate that we are not doing at all. So yeah.
And we'll do Anne and then Gresh.
Well, as the language, did you have any issues with language?
Yeah, I mean, we did French lessons beforehand and we did Darija Arabic lessons while there, but I certainly don't speak either of them with any fluency. I was able to communicate in Spanish in the north a little bit because they're so close to Spain. There's plenty of Spanish speakers around. But the main languages that are used are French and Arabic. And then English is really common. So the university we're at is English speaking. There was a lot of people around us that spoke English at times that could help us. And then the professor who came on the trip, his wife was on the trip as well, and she's fluent in French, so that helped as well. But yeah, I just kind of made it work. I didn't always know what was going on. Sometimes like I just followed my host mom around and we ended up places and like I didn't really know what we were doing. I just went with it. Yeah, and kind of figured it out.
How long were you there?
6 weeks. Yeah, May through like mid to end June.
Okay, we were there decades ago, and I recall that one of the museums had a correspondence between George Washington and their king.
Yes.
And
yeah,
Morocco was the first country in the world to recognize the U.S. as a country, which was
that is true, and they are very proud of it.
Yes,
they're like they'll literally say that, be like, Morocco was the first one to recognize the U.S. and I was like, yep, yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I did, yeah. We were told before going, and then also people will bring it up.
Yeah. So our guide was the one that told us that, yeah. And of course we had to go see the correspondence.
Yeah.
I think there are probably stories around that, but they were corresponding before independence, the King of Morocco.
I don't know why it happened, but
it was under the French. Yeah. And there was a problem with French and France and Britain over that time, so they had to go play against.
Because France helped the U.S. win the revolution, and France controlled. That actually makes a lot of sense. I never knew why.
The question I had was, we were also visiting the Berbers, where you're staying in the desert area. What's the relationship now with the Berbers and the rest of the population?
Yeah, so they're the ones that speak the Amazigh that I mentioned, was one of the 3 languages there. It's kind of like an ethnic minority population. Like, they're like the Berbers are the same as the Amazigh. Those are 2 different names for the same people. The Amazigh is like kind of their name for themselves, and the Berber is like the Moroccan name for them. But they have this relationship where they're the ones leading a lot of these tour guides, so we actually got to talk to some people. And he's saying the tour guides to the desert, I meant. So our tour guide in the Sahara was talking with us at night, and their relationship is often that, like, in the government's eyes, like, they're Moroccan and they speak Arabic and they're Muslim, but then in their own communities, they consider themselves a little more culturally tied to their Amazigh like culture, and they. A lot of them aren't Muslim, although officially they'll say that to the government. They said a lot of them aren't, and they try to retain their practices as much as they can. Traditionally, they were more nomadic and have since settled down more, but like often live in more of these other communities. I wish I knew more about them because a lot of them are the ones living in the desert communities that are affected by like these solar proposals, but I don't know as much about their culture as I would like at the moment. I just know that, yeah, they're just an ethnic minority there. So they face some of the stuff that a lot of people do in different places where like they're not always recognized fully. And their language being an official language of Morocco only happened like the last decade, I think. So it was French and Arabic for a long time, and they just added Amazigh as one of the official ones very recently.
Other questions? I don't see another question. Katie, this was wonderful. Let's give her one more round of applause.
Fair enough. Sorry. Right at the end, yeah.
Hi, I was curious because you said that you were starting another research project, and I was just curious what that's about.
It's a philosophy research paper because I'm crazy enough to take on. So I'm doing that for my final semester at UOD. It's on risk assessment and unquantifiable risks and how you would go about thinking through those. So like I'm really interested in disaster risk management and flooding and things like that. So what I mean by unquantifiable risk is like you've got your quantifiable, like how much, even just like number of human lives lost or like money lost. But you can't really quantify the value of a human life in the same way. And I'm also looking at things like we talk about nuclear waste and risk to future generations. When future generations don't actually currently exist, we consider that an unquantifiable risk. As well as things like loss to culture or community, things that can't really be replaced in that kind of way. So like what ways of thinking through risk and risk management and like ethics could help us actually think about how to manage and prevent risk to things that can't really be quantified or calculated or replaced. So yeah, I just really like philosophy and all of that.
All right, one more round of applause. So interesting. I don't know how to have when you do your next project. We have a few announcements before we end today. You want to make yours first, Linda, and then it exists because of form. You say, aha. Well, 3 or 4 months ago, maybe 5, you invited the director of Lifehouse to be part of this program, gave an excellent presentation. In the process of telling us about Lifehouse, he said that art is used regularly as part of their educational program. So from that, I went down there, I talked more with him, I talked with the education director, and we've got some fascinating stuff in the sanctuary. So please enjoy it and pat yourself on the back. Okay, forums. Uh-oh.
This one works still. All right, let's see.
All right, and in my role today as kind of overseeing the forums, I'm going to make one more announcement about the ERA bus. If you show up at 6:30 tomorrow morning in the parking lot at Perkins at 40th Avenue West, you can go down and do your work for the ERA tomorrow. Now, the other announcement is, as regard to forums, next week's forum, we are calling an Elder Wisdom Panel. And we have Ron Anderson, Linda Paulus, Eager Yunt and Eager, I turned in your name correctly, and Barb Opry, who will be speaking on their life experience and how they became Unitarians and why they remain Unitarians. It should be very interesting. So we hope to see you here next Sunday.